I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry about that. Thank
I
you.
I don't know what happened there. I must have got the time difference wrong. I'm so
You
sorry.
know, it's okay. I think, you know what? It's daylight savings in the US, I believe, is what
Oh,
tripped us up there. But it looks like
oh,
everybody's joining again. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you, Helen.
sorry.
This is one of those things that we get to run into in our global world where we get to do webinars with people on different continents. Time differences are a real uh, bump in the road sometimes, but I really appreciate everybody's patience and understanding this morning. Ultimately, not a big deal. Helen, thank you so much for staying on your toes. And we'll just give people a couple minutes to roll in.
Yeah,
But
I can't seem to make my camera come on. I don't know whether that's
let
something
me
you
see if
have
I
to
can
allow
fix
me to
that.
do.
Yes, probably. More
It says you cannot start
technology.
your video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, you should be able to now.
I don't mind, but it'd be better if you saw me, I
There we
think.
are.
There we
Hi,
are.
Helen.
Sorry for the UK delay there
Oh my
on all
goodness.
aspects.
I think it's a contested subject over here as to whether or not we should keep this time change happening, and
Mm,
another reason to maybe do away with it.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Same here because we have different, Europe's different, and so that's all very confusing.
yeah, we're doing our best. You know, just trying to live in a global society.
Exactly.
Um, well, thanks everyone for being here. For those of you who have for whom this is your first Audience View webinar, my name is Casey Thomas. I am the Public Relations and Content Specialist here at Audience View, and I have the pleasure today of um, bringing bringing to our platform. Helen Dunnett is a very experienced marketing strategist, ticketing industry, CRM expert with over 20 years of experience in the industry. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to you, Helen. Thanks so much for being here today.
Okay, so I will attempt to share my screen to start with. Okay, there we go.
There we go. All right, I'm
Yes.
going to mute
So,
myself.
yeah, I mean, it might be worth me giving a little bit more background to me. So yeah, I started my career a long time ago. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago. And my background is very much the arts. So I did a music degree, university, and I've worked in the arts, cultural, and heritage sector pretty much all of my career. When I was working in organizations, I generally worked in the sort of marketing and communications, audience development, those kinds of areas of organizations, heading up those areas of work. And I've been a consultant since 2010. I have worked with organizations on marketing and audience development because obviously that's my background, and mentoring, and a whole host of other things around that. But in the last few years, I've mainly focused on working with organizations on their customer relationship management strategy, and very much the systems, the IT systems, the software systems that they might use to realize that strategy. And so that's very much what the area that I work on with organizations when I'm doing consultancy. So just thought that might be useful as a bit of background. So I'll move on because I realize we've lost a little bit of time. So I'll try not to speak too quickly. Yeah, so what I thought I would like to start with is, rather than digging straight into finding a system, I thought it might be useful to just sort of set the scene a bit and go about answering the question, what is CRM? What does it stand for? Why is it important? Um, it's not actually that new. The actual term customer relationship management was coined in 1995. And I think there's lots of definitions out there, but it might be just useful to have a definition. And this one's quite a good one, which is that customer relationship management is the establishment, development, maintenance and optimization of long-term mutually valuable relationships between audiences or people and organizations. So that's quite a good kind of descriptor of what it is. And I think then if you kind of move on from that, CRM is very much, in my belief, a philosophy and a business strategy. And it's a business strategy that enables you to understand your audiences, retain them through better customer experience, develop interactions, income and contact, and streamline all those internal and external communications into that kind of virtuous circle. And the important thing here is that a ticketing CRM system or technology can help with that and can support that, which means that CRM becomes that sort of continuous activity of developing the way that your organization works, the way that it thinks, and the way that it behaves. The challenge then, actually, though, is that in not thinking that when you found the right ticketing and CRM solution and put it in place, that's the end point, because it could be easy to think that. So we've kind of established that it sits within your CRM strategy. That CRM ticketing system sits within it, and then it follows really then that it's important not to make CRM a tactic or a marketing function, which can be the way it sits sometimes, but a strategic function. And that means that rather than just focusing on or starting with the IT implementation that is a customer database, that customer database technology, that you begin with your business strategy, and that you set those organizational CRM objectives and those key KPIs. Because if technology is applied to a faulty business strategy, then all that will happen is your organization becomes more efficient at doing the wrong things and it's more likely to fail. So it kind of all has to sit together and it's tied very closely together. So, and that's where I think the leadership team needs to set about clearly defining what they mean by their CRM strategy and what good CRM looks like in the sorts of terms that everybody can understand, as well as committing to investing in people training and processes. And then it's more likely to be a success, really. Okay, so that's kind of set the scene a bit. Now we'll get on to the sort of how do you get the right system. Well, really, it's a minefield now. I mean, when choosing a new ticketing system, the basis for the choice and the options have really changed in recent years, certainly because I've been around a long time. In all of the time I've been around, I mean, the analogy used to be with that sort of buying a car in which all the basic requirements are met, and then with then a few variations in the specifications and the equipment and some limited opportunities for customer chosen options. But it's not really any longer that simple. The software is often more comprehensive across a wide range of functions that people need now in the arts and entertainment sort of business. And really the systems are more looking at handling ticketing, marketing, customer relationship management, loyalty, frequent flyer and membership schemes, fundraising, donations, event planning, and sometimes also room and equipment scheduling, merchandise and retail to a degree, and interfacing with accounting and planning and hospitality tools and other things like that. So it's really quite a different picture. And most market leading suppliers are aiming to meet most of those needs around that sort of single database of truth, if you like. That said, all systems are not equal. Many have similar functionality, but the devil really is in the detail. I spend a lot of my time helping organizations to get the right system for them, particularly, and their needs, particularly. So it isn't a case of there is that system that your colleague down the road has got, well, it will definitely be fine for me. because that isn't necessarily the case. And so, yeah, there are many different options and solutions and ways in which system suppliers will, have different functionalities and in the way that they'll charge. And I'll come to that a bit later. That's just to kind of set the scene, really. The other thing as well is, whether you do this yourself or you get someone like me to help you, it's generally, roughly speaking, a 5-step process, in my view. There's the kind of information gathering and scoping. So that's the bit where you're defining your CRM objectives, working out what it is that you want the IT to help you with. Then there's the almost refining of that into a very much more detailed specification, system specification. And that's very much about what exactly is the system required to do. Are you requiring it to do every function, or are you wanting to link functions or link systems where those systems have other functions, but you want to link them together? So it's thinking about all of that. Then once you've got that specification, it generally is putting that together with some tender documentation and putting that out to some suppliers and getting back your price tenders. And then once you have that and you've reviewed those tenders, it's the evaluation of one or more systems, followed by the appointment, and then finally, obviously, the implementation of the system. So those are generally the steps. So if we just go back a bit and we think about the scoping, as I said before, the scoping is about defining the objectives. It's about having that clear vision of what it is that you want to achieve for CRM and with your ticketing CRM system across the organization. And then it's making sure that there's a plan for, as well, inclusion and consultation with teams and staff across all areas of the organization. That part is very important. And I'll come and talk about that a bit later, but it's as important as what the system does. What is the ticketing system required to do? Gone are the days when systems just did ticketing and a bit of marketing, as I said. Now people want many more functions in the same system so that they can upsell, they can cross-sell, they can capture a more rounded picture of their audience's interactions. And they want to be able to collect that in one place and have a picture of those interactions. And as I said briefly before, do you need multiple functions in one system, or do you want to link other functions and systems together? And that really needs to be thought about and scoped and decided whether they're in scope or out of scope, or how that picture fits together. Okay. This is a slight sidetrack, but I think it's important because I see it a lot in a lot of the organizations that I work in. So I'm just going to dive off slightly here. So breaking down departmental silos is so important to get the most out of your ticketing and CRM systems and to make sure that everything is working together. So I keep saying it, and I'm going to say it again, have the cross-departmental role conversations with all your staff. Try to include as many as you can so that everybody, you've understood everything from everyone's perspective, the picture from everyone's perspective, and then how that fits together. Because that sort of collective ownership and coming together in a common set of goals will definitely reap the rewards in how you use the system, and or whether you've got everything you need in that system. And it's more than likely going to be a bit painful. It will involve dissecting current strategies, business processes, audience engagement plans, just to discover where you are and where you want to be, and how that fits together in the jigsaw puzzle. I really can't emphasize how much a siloed approach can lead to failure of understanding what you need. If it's just seen as a sort of box office kind of marketing thing, it can so often go a bit wrong. Okay. And then the other little sidetrack is that thing about data, because that's also really important. Spending the time to understand how staff are using data with systems now is kind of as important as how they'll want to do so in the future. So just getting that, what are we doing now with data? What will we want to do in the future? And the future proofing means that you won't be looking for another system in a couple of years, that hopefully it's going to take you forward for longer than that. Also, the level of detail to which you do this is kind of a moot point, but mapping out the sort of customer journey, thinking about how your customer interacts with you and your organization across all the different touch points. So purchasing a ticket, attending an event, providing feedback, how is that all going to work and fit in? And is the system, how is the system a part of that is really important as well. And as I said before, the sort of general business processes and practices, and how thinking about how the system might help you to improve and streamline those processes. Because I've again seen examples where organizations have been a bit rigid in, we have this way of doing something, and a new system comes in and I still want to do the thing that way, rather than, and so it's a bit of shoehorning that doesn't really work, rather than kind of thinking, how could this system help me perhaps in a different way? And I might have to just have a rethink about how I'm doing something. So it's just really thinking about that, and aligning your business processes with the customer journey stuff that you've done, so that you can kind of work out whether you're easy or difficult to do business with. Can people get from A to B to C? And the main goal, I guess, well, I think, I'm not guessing, it is, I think, to have a 360-degree view of your audience, your customer, in order to really cater for all of their needs. So I think that's where that comes in. So, next one. What systems are being used now? So think about the systems that are in play currently. How will the new ticketing CRM system need to link and integrate? Particularly a key player really here is the website, and involving your web developer in that journey. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, ideally you want as much data as possible in one place, or linking together with other systems so that you're bringing it into one place to get that 360-degree view. I know that sometimes isn't as easy as it might be, but that's the goal, I would suggest. And the next step is to assess whether and how you'd want to link or integrate systems. And there is likely to be a cost to this. I think sometimes that can get sort of overlooked, and not really thought through very carefully, and then it comes further down the line when you're implementing your new ticketing CRM system. There's a whole the can of worms kind of opens about integration. So it's really important to really think about that. And when you're thinking about suitable suppliers as well, to kind of note that some suppliers will control access to their system's database. And so if you want other in-house systems to interface with the ticketing CRM system, especially the website, then you probably want an open database such as SQL, and also it makes future migration between systems easier. So just some things to think about there. Functionality specification. As I said earlier, a few slides ago, do use staff consultation to inform and define that. It shouldn't just be one or two people in the organisation at a senior, especially not at a senior level in some ways, because you do need to have that input from staff that are using the system. And the document that you put together should be a combination of those detailed must-do essential items, those desirable, it should do that, and those useful, it could do that criteria. And also you might want to add to that some if you have some very particular ways of doing business, perhaps some business scenarios that you require the system to help you solve, because every organisation has a very particular way of doing business, or has very particular products, and those things are important to kind of feature in that, when you're kind of building that specification. And then you would obviously supply the list of requirements, as we spoke before, to potential suppliers. It's a good idea to identify at least 3. I mean, certainly when I'm working with organisations, we might start with a longer list than that. We might start with 10 that we're kind of looking at, and then we might look at that against the functionality specification that we've done and say, oh, well, actually, we need to narrow that down a bit. But ideally, you should have 3, just so that you've got some comparators to make. There are lots of options, so you either need to do your own research of the marketplace, or you can use a consultant like me to help you. And if you're unsure, it can be a good idea to invite a few suppliers to a pre-tender demo day or beauty contest, or whatever you want to call it, and get them to give you an overview of what their system offers. And then that just gives you a picture of, we had these thoughts about what we wanted. We've seen 2 or 3 systems. Yeah, we think there are systems out there that can do it. We can see that, and then you can go from there. And you can also see what other arts organisations are doing. But again, be wary of just saying, oh, well, my friend down the road uses this system, so it must be the best system. And then obviously invite tenders to get and suppliers to match their functionalities to your list. And you might want to devise a scoring system to use that to assess it against. Now, I'm saying evaluating different systems. This is the bit where I mean the doing demos. And what are the ticketing system options? Well, there are essentially 3, I think. There's the out-of-the-box, develop, finished system that you either install on your local servers, which less people do these days, or opt for a supplier-hosted version. And usually there's an upfront purchase cost and an annual hosting or maintenance charge. Then there's software as a service, which means it's not your own system within its own database, but instead it's a single iteration, multi-tenant shared system. So the database is in compartments, and obviously your compartment isn't shared with another organization, but that's kind of the way it works. And finally, enterprise solutions kind of take the best of the previous 2 and deliver a platform of integrated modules. And those modules can be from the main supplier and third parties. So that's, broadly speaking, it's those sort of options. And this is the chance to interview and really grill the system suppliers, decided, and through a demo. I think what's really important there, especially if you're not very familiar with doing this process, is to not let the supplier just do the sales pitch and just tell you about all their amazing bells and whistles. Your job is to get them to actually show you how their system can and will do the things you want it to do, and to give some real practical, sort of examples of how it will work. I mean, often system suppliers will even create dummy kind of data, dummy things from about where if they've looked into your organization properly and you've given them enough information, they can do that to show you how it would work in your situation. And again, I'm going to say it again, make sure that in those demos, it's not just 3 or 4 people, that you've got representation from all the different teams in your organization who are going to be using that system, that you should ideally also have your web developer in that conversation, even if it's just for a part of that demo, and they're an external. I would still advise they're in that demo, and that you make sure that you cover off all the things like training and support that you'll get for implementation and on an ongoing basis, all the stuff around how the finance elements work, and also all, really dig down into anything that you want to talk about with regards to integrations. So making a decision. It's worth, as part of that post-demo decision-making process, to formally score suppliers across a range of criteria, not just the pure functionality. So it is a good idea to go back to the basics of what you need the system to do, and did they actually demonstrate that their system could achieve that, and also to score against things like the cost and value for money, the company financial stability and resilience, the ability to deliver adequate levels of support and training, the ability to deliver all the technical requirements, which includes the integrations and web and all of those other things, and to get references from other clients. I would also suggest that you don't have to rush to make a decision after one demo. I would generally make demos a whole day's worth when I'm working with clients. But even then, I think it sometimes can be useful to have follow-up demos on very particular areas of systems you maybe didn't quite see what you wanted to see, to follow up with clarification questions, to ask for anything additional. You kind of need to really make sure that you have covered everything and all of your questions. And then when you get to the negotiating the contract, it's just to be very careful about doing due diligence, and it can sometimes not be that straightforward. It depends on different suppliers, but if they've got standard terms, you've got to kind of work within that, or try to negotiate on that. But sometimes there's a difficulty there. They might not be able to provide absolute guarantees on support response and fixed times and things like that, but you do kind of need to think clearly that through clearly. And then budget, because sometimes that doesn't come up, or it does come up, and you get the costs from the suppliers. But I think it's really important to think about, and perhaps this slide should have come a bit earlier, but you need to think about what it is and is it realistic. You need to do that research with suppliers and other organisations similar in size and scale to you, and you need to consider whether you need to fundraise for the system that you want. And in terms of the cost, the answer isn't always straightforward there. It all depends on fitness for purpose, on volume and value of sales, and just what you'll have to pay for. And there are lots of different pricing models. They vary quite widely, from leasing, pay-as-you-go, lifetime licenses, annual licenses, multiple year licenses based on volume of tickets. And you need to think about whether you're able to commit more budget upfront as a capital cost with you want lower annual costs, or whether you want a revenue purchase where it's pretty much the same annual cost for a period of time. Those are all things that you kind of need to really think through. It does make it there are lots of different pricing models out there, and it does make it quite difficult to compare like for like directly. And you can sometimes find that when you sort of unpick it all, that cost of ownership can be many more times more for one system compared to another. So you need to use that sort of meat principle, which is most economically attractive tender, to kind of determine that fitness for purpose. I tend to use tend to try and guide suppliers towards using a spreadsheet that I have created that presents the costs in the same way, regardless, so that the clients that I'm working with can see that they can compare that one with that one with that one, because it is quite a difficult thing to navigate. And there will be some additional costs to consider, such as payment gateways and hardware and web development and integration, because it's not always the ticketing CRM supplier that's where the cost is. It might be with the web developer where the cost is. And so you have to think about those things and how they're going to impact your budget. And so to sum up on that cost thing, I think it's just ensuring that you do carefully compare those costs, and so that you can draw up that sort of cash flow and properly account for it. And I would suggest over a 5-year period, a 5-year anticipated life, or 3 to 5 years, because ideally you're not going to be changing your system after a couple of years. You want to feel that you've made a good choice and that it's going to last you for some time. And then Casey asked me to just touch on embedding the system. So yeah, I suppose here I'd like to just, these are some of them are my observations in terms of the lots and lots of clients that I've worked with. So in the many projects I've worked on, it's that I think a big cultural shift's needed, and it's often massively underestimated. And even if it has been acknowledged, and sometimes it's not, which is a bit worrying, you kind of really need that adoption and forward plan. Some of the things that I think can help to change that culture, to make that culture shift forward and to help embed the system, are having if you haven't got a CRM and insights manager, which often lots of arts organisations can't afford to have a dedicated person, having a CRM team is a really good idea. Ideally with representatives from different departments or areas, so that you've got that kind of different picture from all the different aspects of the business. And it's whilst you might have a single person that liaises with your ticketing CRM system supplier, it's important to have that team that are pushing things forward, or when things are not working, or when you've got new ideas about how you want to use the system, that you've got that way of moving those things forwards. And I was having a think about what sort of qualities you need to be in this group. This might be open to argument. I'll get lots of questions now about this. But these are just some of my thoughts. I think you need to be pragmatic and very open to change. It's good if you're an opinion influencer. You've got to have a vested interest. I think you've got to be available and committed. If you haven't got the time, then it's not going to be great. Representation, good, representative of the business and passionate about the results, and be a real kind of evangelist for it. And I think creating an education program for all of the staff, even if they're not on that sort of CRM team, is really important as well. Alongside the idea of having regular training on the system. What I often see is that people invest in the training, the initial training when they purchase the system, and that's done, and then there isn't really much training after that. And what then often happens is that people leave, people learn bad habits, which become the word on how to use the system, and then they think, and when it becomes a little bit broken like that, they then decide that the system's not very good because it doesn't do what they want. But sometimes it's just because they've forgotten how to use the system. So I would suggest that regular training, annual training, is always a good idea. And also, I think it's really good, if you can, to put in clear measures that show the value of adopting and applying the different strategic initiatives, and that you're celebrating excellence when it's achieved, and that you know that you're at that point by setting those KPIs at the beginning, at the outset. And I was going to give a little example here. I worked with Shakespeare's Globe in the UK, and yeah, this was something that came out of, and yeah, I love it. I really love this quote from Doug, because it kind of really says what you'd hope. Just to kind of finish that element, it would be entirely impossible to, perhaps desirable even, to deliver an implementation of a system with just a very small project team. But I would argue that yes, they might be the ones that are pushing it forward and making sure that it's happening, on keeping on track, but that it's really important to engage all the other departments as well. I keep saying that bit as well, but it's so important, because you've invested in it, you've invested in the money in it. You know, you want to make sure that it delivers the customer experience, the money, the bottom line, and the art, you know, what you're actually selling. So aside from configuring the system to deliver and be used in an optimal way, think about how you'll deliver the project broadly and what resources are needed, who will benefit from the project and how, and what value it will deliver to the whole organization. And in doing that, do that business process map. And I spoke about that earlier as well, about thinking about what business processes needed to change or be fixed, what should remain for the CRM system to work within, what's the flow chart, you know, for managing new and existing processes, and where does the integration sit? How does your online journey work for your customer? How will that work between the web developer and the system supplier, and what will the hardware be there? So as I say, that's all really important. And hopefully, oh yes, I'm going to leave time for questions. I'm just going to give you a few takeaways. I don't know if I need to read them out, but because I'm just going over what I've said. Define the core goals, have a vision for what you want to achieve, involve the whole organization. Remember that one size or one system doesn't fit all. Do your homework, get the advice if you need to. Understand what online experience you want, get your web agency in there. Figure out what the system will do versus the other functions and systems that you've got, and make sure you understand the costs, both upfront and annual, and over a period of time, 3-5 years. So those would be my kind of core takeaways, I think. There we are.
All right. Thanks so much, Helen. That was really, I hope everybody finds that was really informative. And
I hope
this is
so.
where I'll remind everyone that please utilize the Q&A function to type in any questions here, or if you'd rather ask your question verbally, I can bring people off mute. I did write a question down while people get theirs in. So when you were talking about data collection, and obviously that's a crucial component in this topic. But I was thinking about how people are interacting differently, I think, when it comes to sharing their information. I know now, like when I'm using a certain app, Apple can just automatically give me the option to hide my information, and they'll provide some kind of dummy Apple email address. And so I'm virtually invisible to that app or what have you. So I'm curious if you have any insight on that in terms of like maybe ways around that, or for organizations to make it really clear to people why they need information and how that will benefit people in the long run.
Well, there's some basic things there around, especially if it's things around ticketed experiences, things that you're actually ticketing and purchasing, and events where you're actually attending an event rather than just going to a museum or whatever, or where it's not so crucial. And I think that one of those things is around, if you don't give us some basic information, if we have to cancel the event or move you to another day or whatever, we can't do that. If we don't have any information about you, we can't do that. So you will end up just turning up, and it could be cancelled. So there's some basic stuff around that, I think, for sure. But I think that it's often people, I don't know, I think there's a bit of reluctance sometimes to explain why you want the data. And I think if people know that, they're much more likely to give it to you. So, and it might be that it's because sometimes organizations are capturing data that they don't really need. And so I always say to people, do you really need someone's age? Why would they give it to you? Unless it's because the event is age specific, or because then that makes people question, why should I give that data? There's no reason for them to have it. So I think it is a bit of that sort of messaging online about why it's important for you to give some data, and what the relevance of it is, and how you want to make sure that they're kept in touch with what you're doing as an organization.
Mm-hmm. All right, no one's typed anything yet, so
go on, please. Someone ask a question.
Questions all day.
You don't have to say it out loud. You can just type it in.
What's your advice in terms of, I mean, I know you touched on, obviously, you don't want to be switching systems too frequently, but when it comes to long-term contracts and that period for reevaluation, and then also weighing the cost benefit when it comes to some new flashy system that has some really great looking features, how to judge the trade-off of, maybe sometimes it's just worth it to ask my existing CRM. Is it possible to design something like this so that we don't have to make the switch? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And to be honest with you, I probably do myself out of work quite often, because I often have that conversation where I say, is it worth us just reviewing the system that you have? It might be that that it does all the things that you want, but you've lost sight of that. And people will then, I think it is worth having a period of reviewing the performance of your current system. And you might decide that you still want to go out and look at the rest of the market and include your current supplier in that process and tell them that. Or you might decide that you've done that review and actually you can challenge the supplier to up their game, or find out more about what it is that they can do that can help your needs. But I often do that sort of reviewing systems before people actually decide, yes, I do want to change my system.
Thank you. We do have a couple more questions now. Somebody asks, do you have advice regarding the cost of a CRM system as a percentage of annual revenue or some other measure?
No, I don't actually, is the honest answer, because organizations are so different, and people cover that cost in so many different ways. I mean, in the UK here, a lot of people at the moment are fundraising for those costs, and what they're doing is asking suppliers if they can have more upfront and capitalizing the cost, so that they can afford to have a system or a better system than they've got, and then trying to keep their annual costs relatively low. But I don't have a particular formula because I'm not sure it would work for all organizations.
Sure.
Anyone else? I can see one.
Somebody said it's a great call. Oh, in terms of only collecting data which has a purpose. Yeah, really trying to avoid putting off customers, I'm sure, is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. It's very tempting to want to collect lots of data, and a debate that's happening again here in terms of, because we have the Arts Council and they want certain data to monitor the types of audiences that there are. And people are saying to me, can we collect that data through our ticketing system? And it's a difficult point, because if you ask those questions and of customers directly, and then attach them directly to their accounts so that it's not anonymized, you have a whole GDPR nightmare. Particularly if it's sensitive data like your ethnicity or your gender or your age or some of those other pieces of information. And so, you have to weigh that up. Do I really, what do I need it for? And do I really need to attach it to their record? Is it better just done through a survey that's anonymized?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Another here. How many people attach a value to a ticket sale, obviously, but should you also attach a value to capturing a customer data record when considering the value your CRM system will provide?
I think that's a really good idea. Yeah, I do. I think that's a really good idea because it can be because there are lots of organisations now that, particularly museums and galleries, that are seeing the value of having a CRM system, stroke ticketing, and they might be using ticketing not for paid for tickets, but for entry into special exhibitions, which might still be free, but the value is there in building your audience. So the value is in creating those contacts and those people having attended those things, and yeah, building up your kind of database of contacts. So I think absolutely it would be great, and it would be great for systems to be able to capture that value in some way, so that it could be displayed, when you're doing statistics then for insights for your board or for your senior management. I don't know if I've got any examples of people doing that, but that's a great idea.
That was going to be my question. So
Yeah, no, I
if
might
you
take
run
that one.
into
I might
one,
write
let us
that one
know.
down. Whoever said that, I might write that down and just take that one away.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we just have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to stall while anyone may want to type any last minute questions. Let me see if I wrote down any more. Oh, this is a good, I mean, it's probably really difficult to answer, but when you kept touching on, involving the whole organization,
Mm.
when is it, too many cooks in the kitchen? When are we hearing too many opinions?
Yeah, I'll just usually I'll relate it to the way that I tend to do things. I tend to involve a lot of people early on in the discovery process. And but I think perhaps my natural cutoff is well, if do these people actually, are they actually going to use the system? Are they actually, because frankly, if you're in the tech team, on stage tech team, you're not going to be using the system, so are they actually, or volunteers might not be, they might be, but they might not be. So it's just about really thinking about who are the actual users of the system, and then the cutoff is probably below that. But I would tend to involve quite a lot of people in that discovery process about how are you using systems, what are you using them for, what data are you collecting, how are you doing that, and then the other point at which I would say keep some more people in there is for the demos. And that doesn't mean hundreds of people in the organisation, but at least some representation from the different areas. So from front of house, from some visitor services, from box office, from fundraising. So you've got at least some representation from all those core areas of people who are actually physically using the systems.
And somebody just weighed in here, always involve finance. They think it
Oh
doesn't
yes,
affect them
I
to
agree.
100% rely on the
Always.
reporting and data and influence the process.
Absolutely,
Yes.
because so often I find with organizations when I talk to them about, oh, let's have some discovery sessions, and they'll say, oh, yes, the communications team and the development team. And I'll say, what about the finance team? Because that part's really important about
So
how that,
often overlooked.
yeah,
But
yeah,
so critical. Yes.
yeah, absolutely critical.
All right. Well, unfortunately, this is the end of our time, but Helen, thank you so much. And thanks for rolling with my inability to tell time on a world clock. But thank you all for being here today.
No, I think I was probably equally at fault. But never mind, we did it, and we did it
We
in
did
the
it, and
time.
it was great. Yes.
Yeah, and if I can't see your faces, thank you so much, everyone who has attended, and I hope it was useful for you. And if you think of some questions afterwards, I'm sure Casey won't mind if you put them her way, and I'm happy to answer them.
Please do. Yes. All right.
Okay,
Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next time.
thank you.
Bye.